Showing Up for Racial Justice, or SURJ, is a national network of groups and individuals working to undermine white supremacy and for racial justice. Through community organizing, mobilizing, and education, SURJ moves white people to act as part of a multiracial majority for justice with passion and accountability. The Western Mass chapter of SURJ formed in 2014, and in the early years focused on education and conversation around the impacts of systemic racism and the importance of breaking white silence. This took many forms, including a door-knocking campaign, organizing and attending rallies, tabling, offering dialogue circles, and hosting monthly general meetings. Western Mass SURJ also formed accountability relationships with local organizers of color. And in 2017, with guidance from these partners, the chapter embarked on a reparations campaign. The purpose of this campaign initially was to educate people about the concept of reparations and encourage them to engage in a regular practice of paying reparations. Western Mass SURJ began collecting reparations payments from members and others who attended meetings, and in 2018 made regular reparations payments to 3 local BIPOC-led groups. BIPOC is an acronym for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. During this time, the chapter hosted an educational kickoff event that also included a conversation between local BIPOC organizers, witnessed by a predominantly white audience. Next, the chapter began to discuss the possibility of a more tangible campaign goal specifically linked to housing justice. In 2019, Western Mass SURJ began dedicating all reparations payments collected toward the purchase of a house for Stickii and ShaeShae, 2 Black, queer, trans freedom fighters who had also been some of the chapter's accountability partners. Initially, a specific house was identified that helped establish a goal amount of $95,000, but that option did not come to pass. Instead, the chapter raised $140,000 over 2 years and supported Stickii and ShaeShae in purchasing a home through a real estate agent. While this process was complicated by the COVID-19 pandemic, Stickii and ShaeShae closed on their home in June of 2020. As part of documenting this campaign, some core organizers with Western Mass SURJ sat down for 2 conversations, one with Stickii and ShaeShae and one with current and former organizers, to talk about the house buying campaign, housing security, class and racial justice, and reparations. Thank you for listening to the conversations that follow, and please consider making a practice of paying reparations in your own life.
Okay. Hello and welcome everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time today. My name is Allie and I'm a core organizer with Western Mass SURJ, and we're here today with several folks to talk about the house buying reparations project. So we have Stickii and ShaeShae, who are the new homeowners. Welcome. We have Misha, who is a founding core organizer from Western Mass SURJ and now works at the national level for SURJ, showing up for racial justice. We have Sue, who is a core organizer currently, and also Kelly. So we're just going to jump right into the questions. How did you get involved in this reparations house buying project and why? Maybe Misha, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I remember years ago when I was getting to know Stickii and ShaeShae at the organizer roundtable, and we had a conversation, and I was like, what should SURJ be doing? And they talked to me about reparations and about how white people need to be accountable for our access to money and need to be moving that to Black communities. And that really planted a seed for me. I think that must have been like 2 years before our chapter decided to start this campaign. Meanwhile, I was also feeling really inspired by Chanel Helm, who's an organizer with Black Lives Matter Louisville, as a Black woman buying homes for her community in Louisville. And that seemed like a really concrete way for us to put reparations into action as individuals, while also pushing for reparations on a more systemic level.
We, at the time, were running BLM 413, Springfield's chapter BLM, and we were struggling. We're struggling a lot. We're in a lot of conversations about how to be a radical organizer and also live sustainably. Like how it wasn't a coincidence that it was almost impossible to really gather a lot of our community because they were working or had so much on their plate that like to give any more time into something was just next to impossible. And like it just got me thinking about like what other chapters were doing and what other folks in the community were talking about. And reparations was a huge conversation, and we felt that at the time nobody was talking about what real reparations look like, what real sustainability looks like for Black organizing. And it just kind of like mixed with my own shit and what I happen to be going through. And I've been historically pretty much my whole life housing unstable. So like in a way that gave me an advantage because I was almost like, well, you can't catch me if you don't know where I live, haha, and I'm never stable. But at the same time, it's also like, well, I don't have a community base. I don't have a lot of flexibility around what I can do and what I can't do, because I'm continuously trying to hustle rent money or like packing all of my shit up and like trying to house it in 7 different places so that like I can one day collect all of my belongings and be somewhere more permanently. So I think that's where like the that began my thinking around what reparations could look like. And I actually don't remember what the exact conversation was around it, but
I do.
yeah. So maybe Shay can talk about the initial stages.
Yeah, so basically what has transpired is basically look kind of like the start off point was that a local Black trans man who lived here in Springfield, who's known for like housing folks and stuff, was moving away. And our original thought was to try to purchase his house. To keep that, we felt like one, it'd be putting money in a Black trans person's pocket and also housing Black trans folk. And so you're like, that seems like such a beautiful relationship and a way that, you know, somebody who has also given to a community could also leave this community and move on to the later stages of his life, you know, secure. And that felt really important to us. So I know that like the first conversations were specifically like, we would really like to purchase this house. We'd really like to raise the money to purchase this house from this person, for us to keep it and for us to kind of hold on to that legacy of offering space to people. Like Stick and I, at the time, I no longer work there, but we're working with Out Now, Springfield's only LGBTQ youth group. And so we've seen a lot of like youth homelessness and or young folks coming out of DCF and being homeless. A lot of us at the time wishing we could have been in the position to help them. And so it kind of like ticked off all of these boxes in the way we think about organizing and the way we think about creating community.
And Stickii and ShaeShae, would one or both of you like to talk about what it means to own the home in your life?
Oh, it's complicated and scary, and I've been thinking a lot about this. It's different. It's different than anything else that I've ever experienced in a real way. Like, I think that I have shifted from a person who has lived a really nomadic, like really poor, really like whatever I can do to hustle to survive type lifestyle to somebody who like doesn't have that anymore. And now it's like redefining what it like means to be secure, because now I have like a whole home, like somewhere where I can't be told to leave, somewhere where I can't wake up in the middle of the night to some chaos and all of a sudden have to pack my bags and figure out the next situation. It's a commitment within our personal relationship that I've never experienced before. Like, I thought signing a lease with somebody was big news, but like to have a deed like with another person, it's just like mind blowing. And what that looks like, it's just like totally new, totally different, and also like a sense of responsibility that I've never experienced either. Like we're finding like the quirks of having a house that, like, you know, the things that you don't realize during your inspection and stuff like that, and like realizing that every single door has a lock on it and me not understanding what that means. Like, wow, everything, like you can lock every single door. Like, what is that about? And it's just been also like a little bit nerve wracking because it's like before if something happens, it's like, oh well, I'm gonna call so and so, fix your kitchen, dog. Something's leaking, and somebody handles that. Now it's wow, building community and
It's like Kelly,
help us, yeah, and just like really like being creative and like I don't know, it's so overwhelmingly great. Like these are like I feel like I keep telling and saying that like these are the problems that I've been asking for. Like these are the things that like I've been like, you know, this stress is a stress that like feels different from any of the other stresses that I've experienced because this is solely mine and Shay's of course, but like it's just ours.
Yeah. And for me, like definitely very similar things about like this difference of like where the responsibility lies and that kind of thing. Um, you know, and I have a different relationship to housing than Stick does. So like I know like she feels like this super duper sense of like, oh, nobody could kick me out. But I lived in a house that was taken by eminent domain and turned into a parking lot. So like even in this like this, it definitely doesn't feel super secure just because I was like, I thought owning your house meant it was your house, and they were like, no. And so like it the level of security is different on my end. And in the sense that like getting into this house was like for me, the security that I was seeking was more safety than like a permanent living space. Like it's super great to own a home. And there are great things and there are crap things. But the thing about like the only person I have to engage with is Stick. Like the only person that I need to be accountable to in my space is Sticky. Um, the only person whose emotions I have to worry about is Sticks. And in my past living situations, I've been in really violent living situations where people were emotionally, mentally, and physically violent towards me. And so having a space where I don't really have to worry about that. Like that's not to say that there's not hiccups and there's not arguments, but I'm not worried that in the middle of the night somebody's gonna kick a door down, or I'm gonna get into a physical altercation with another person because they were in a bad mood today. Um, and so for me, like that was the safety that I was looking for. Like, you know, there was points in the campaign, but where it was just like, fuck it, we'll just take the money and get an apartment somewhere just to be out of, um, you know, the volatile living situation we were in. So just to have that breath of fresh air, even just almost 2 months in, has just been life changing. Like just in this short amount of time, how different our interactions are with each other, even because we're not triggered 24/7. So we're not engaging with each other already on 1,000 and then expecting to somehow be caring and compassionate towards one another when we're being triggered all the time. You know, and also this is happening during COVID. I'm like an immunocompromised individual, and what I need for safety isn't what other people want to do. And so that became a really huge issue later on in the campaign. And so like now I don't have to worry about that. Like I'm not afraid that Sticks is gonna come home and bring the Rona. Like because she doesn't put herself in situations and doesn't go out and doesn't do things because keeping me safe is important. to Stick, and Stick is invested in me living a long and healthy life, or as healthy as it can be.
So the next question is, SURJ has a commitment to relational organizing. Can you talk about the role of relationships in this process? Maybe why don't we start with you, Sue?
Yeah, I would say that what really came through for me with all of this, all the parts of the project was, I understood very early on that it was just not going to work if we couldn't have a basic level of trust with each other, and amongst all of that and all of us. And you know, coming in with Kelly when Misha already had a long-standing relationship with Stickii and ShaeShae, I just understood that I really had to step it up and make sure that I was gonna be there for everybody, and so that people could rely on us, especially, as white folks in a position where we were asking a lot of Stickii and ShaeShae to enter into this project with us, and to have some measure of trust that we were going to be able to pull it off. So that was something that I carried with me the whole time through this project, that commitment to being there for the project, for Stickii and ShaeShae, and and feeling like this could, seeing that as on the microcosm of what I want to happen in this country and this world as a whole.
One, it was like, this all started because we have built a relationship with Misha in particular. Like, Misha has become a core person in our life. And so, like, one, this wouldn't have happened if not for Misha. And that is a truth that we hold on the daily. Like, what Misha offered, and the lengths of which Misha would go to try to house us and to get the funds to house us, was a beautiful thing to watch on our end. I think also what people don't think about too when we talk about relationships, just in a general sense, is like, there were also other outside of SURJ folks who were invested in us being housed. So like, our own personal organizing community was stepping up and offering resources to educate folks to help us reach this goal. Like Alicia Funding and Shanique Spalding. Like, there were people outside of SURJ who we weren't asking for financial support, and because of security, we weren't sharing the fundraising. So that in of itself was scary, thinking we're not going to reach it because we can't even reach out to our own community for safety reasons. And just to see people who were in the know out here also making that effort and being like, nah, we're going to do what we need to do to get y'all into a house. We are going to push these people and train them and teach them how to make these asks and how to go about getting this, because y'all deserve housing. And just this all stemmed from who we were as organizers and our reputation as organizers. So just to see other people, even though we have intimate relationships with these folks, actually being willing to invest their time and their energy into educating folks because they saw the value in us and the value in housing folks, and I hope that it goes deeper than our value as organizers, which I believe it does. But that was definitely key in how this was able to actually take life. It really was built on the relationships and building a relationship of trust with Sue and Kelly. When Misha had to take a step back, those are all big things that we had to challenge ourselves to do. But also every time a challenge was posed, people did show up and did what they could to help us through a mountain of different stuff. Yeah, so I think the relationship aspect of it was so key, that I don't know how it would have happened without that, to be honest. And I hope that in going forward, like, you know, I hope that this is a type of project that, you know, can spread. And, you know, like, there are other organizations outside of SURJ who are housing folks and looking to build small communities and those kind of things. And it's like so dope to watch while also having this come to fruition. And hoping more so that like it can be less invested in who we were as whole people versus like as Black folks, as trans folks, like people deserve fucking housing. And that at the end of the day is like the key piece of it. But like the relationships were huge, specifically I think here, to making that actually happen.
Yeah, definitely. I resonate with everything that you said, and also like it takes such a tremendous amount of trust. Um, like we weren't even just trusting SURJ with the idea that we might be stable. It wasn't even just about like our hopes and dreams and things like that, but it was actually like Shay's actual tangible physical safety. Um, and what that looked like. And I feel like one of the most beautiful parts of this particular campaign in general was the fact that at every single turn, not a narrative, not a word, not anything was without a conversation on our end. Like there was nothing that, like, I feel like wasn't a conversation or wasn't able to be accommodated. I feel like we were able to build a relationship of trust that meant more than just, oh, these people aren't going to put me in a dump that I'm not going to be able to manage. It was, wow, every step of the way from how folks were raising money, from how we're talking about the campaign, from how we could be involved was like honored our whole entire existence, not just this one piece of, well, we want to do reparations and this is what it's going to look like because we're the people with the money. It was like, it was deep and meaningful in a way that like as a longtime organizer, you don't even see that a lot in a general sense. Like just how folks were really eager to learn and eager to really be accountable for how they move in the world as white folks, not just, oh, here's this bunch of money that we raised, we're going to do this thing.
Yeah, echo also the relationships with Alicia and Shanique, who have shared so much knowledge and support, and also Rose Webster Smith, and having those relationships in the community with organizers, and it made it possible for this campaign to be as powerful as it is. And then also building relationships with people, many people who are contributing money to the campaign. You know, you can't just put out something on Facebook that says, give us money and expect for a whole bunch of money to come in. That entails having a lot of individual conversations, community conversations, and also that provides a level of accountability as a group when you are trusted with this money to follow up with this kind of work that has such high level of stake of like providing a safe, supportive home for people we love and who deserve to be housed, as everyone does. It really does take a whole big community, and then also building the relationships within the chapter of Western Mass Surge, and digging really deep into class and whiteness. That was really important to me as a working class white person. We had to do a lot of deep work together around whiteness and class and different access to money, and also building trust as a group to do this work powerfully and accountably.
Thanks. So I'm curious to know what were people's thoughts, feelings, or fears about this project early on? Maybe Kelly, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks. And I think what Misha just spoke to is like a great jumping off point. For me, I grew up middle class and I've never experienced housing instability. And, but my mom died when I was in my 20s and she owned a home and had life insurance. And as a result of that, I now own a home outright. I don't have a mortgage. And despite being middle class, I have had income instability over the years. And particularly in like the past 10 years, it's be it feels so clear to me the stability that I have, even with income going up and down, because of the fact that my housing is secure. And so when this project first came up, like I could just like feel it in my bones how important it was and how life changing it is, to have that, as much as any of us can be guaranteed something, that guarantee. And I felt really like invested right from the get-go. And I live, in an area where there's a lot of wealth, and a lot of like kind of hidden wealth. And I never doubted that we could raise the money. I sometimes doubted whether it would come through the channels that I knew it could come through. Um, but I knew it was there and I knew we could do it. But yeah, but I sometimes it was hard because I would think that could have a conversation with somebody about reparations and then it wouldn't go the way I thought. Um, Sometimes I was worried about our chapter's capacity to see it through, um, as people have come and gone, which is just a part of organizing. Um, and yeah, but I think ultimately I like really just believed in it deeply and I believe in the importance of it deeply. And so I was just like, I'm in, let's go.
I think one of the things I find like most important to mention now is like, yeah, there was fears of like, these white folks are talking a big game, but will they deliver? But like as we built relationships and as we started seeing the money like come up and there was like monthly or whatever check-ins or whatever, and like, hey, we reached 30 G's, and I was like, 30 G's, that's a lot of money. And then like out of nowhere it was like, oh no, we're at 50, and it was like, wow, like this is actually happening. But I feel like the scariest part was when we started to think about outside entities, like when it was like, okay, so we have this money, it looks like this is actually going to happen. Like for me, it was like, wow, will these other people in the community like more systematically like positioned, like the realtor and the inspector and like figuring out like tax stuff, like will those people like be invested in us in the way that SURJ is invested in us? Will those people that we're asking to like that do this on the regular in a predominantly white dominated field, like will they be able to hold us like SURJ is holding us? And like through relationships and community, we ended up finding really dope folks. Our realtor, Susie Buzzy, was phenomenal and like meshed with us. And even when there were moments of conflict and like tough moments, like still heard what we had to say, reflected and changed in a beautiful way. And that was something that I didn't expect, because as good intentioned and as dope with the work that SURJ put in, like can we hold like the realtor or the inspector to those same standards? And I think that was the scary part for me.
For me, it was really the safety concern. Really trying to hide. Um, we were like coming in with packets from Susie and being like, okay, we gotta stash this somewhere because if one of them comes in the room, like they're gonna see we're looking at houses. Or like only having conversations in our car because that was the only place we could guarantee people couldn't hear us. And so for me, the scary things really was my safety and entrusting my safety to like the SURJ folks. And realistically, we mostly only dealt with Misha, Kelly, and Sue through the whole process. So it was also like having to trust their judgment on who knew what in the core organizing and in the general organizing, So for me, like that was my biggest concern, was like really trying to hide the fact that this was happening, that we were even looking at anything. In COVID line being like, I'm going to a doctor's appointment, or we're just running out to get, or I'm looking at an apartment, right? Because we needed to move out of that situation, but we didn't want to bring, have people be like, oh, y'all have a house now, like I can come too. And we were actively like, we're leaving the toxic shit behind, and that means that these people they can't come into this chapter of our life.
I was extremely excited and felt really to start this out, and also terrified that maybe we were biting off more than we can chew. Were we promising safety and stability when we didn't know that all this money would come in, or maybe we would mess up on something like taxes? I mean, yeah, also fears about outside entities, banks, the IRS, whoever, and but we skilled up to meet that. We did everything the best ways that we could in order to safeguard the process from any kind of trouble like that, like being extremely accountable in terms of holding the money. I was also scared though, because I know that people, I mean, white people who have wealth have that wealth because either they or their ancestors used Black and brown people and poor and working class people, and generally don't give up that wealth, even if it's like couched now as just like looking out for the family or whatever. People with wealth tend to give a lot less than poor and working class people who also rely on their communities for support, and so I was worried about being able to raise all that money. But I also took a lot of strength from our relationships. Also, my relationships with other anti-racist, poor and working class raised white people, learning about community fundraising, grassroots fundraising, and then some of our movement ancestors as well, like hearing Anne Braden's story. She was a white Southern woman, and at one point in her life, she and her husband purchased a house for their Black friends. And I mean, that was at a different time in the 20th century, but I know that we have this lineage to call on of putting our reputations and sometimes our safety at risk, because we know that that reparations, that housing justice, that all of these things are going to make all of our lives better. And I have come out feeling like closer to collective liberation, being able to taste that. And we still have a lot of work to do, but yeah, I mean, it's important to be real about all of those things when you're taking something big like this on.
Yeah, thank you. In just a few sentences, maybe what are some of the moments that really stick out in this process, be them highs or lows? And this could be for anyone.
Just I'll never ever forget the moment when we did the walkthrough the night before closing, Stickii and ShaeShae and Susie, and Susie handing y'all the keys, and it's like, ooh, yeah. Until that moment, it's like you're like, okay, all right, it's not really done till you got the keys in your hands, and that was just the best moment ever, and the looks on your faces. And being able to leave that night and know, like, okay, yeah, you've got your place. That and to for me to be able to tell all the people I knew who had paid reparations for the campaign, to tell them about that moment. And, with everything else going on in the country and the world, that, this felt like an incredible moment of hope for me. And it was a real bright spot, the end of the campaign, but also a bright spot for the future. So that moment of the walkthrough.
I remember bringing a proposal to a Western SURJ meeting about buying the house that we originally had in mind, and coming to the group and saying, I want to buy this outright and spend the next year raising the money to do it. I felt really nervous about that, and then felt like overwhelmingly joyful when the group just unanimously said, yeah, we're throwing down for this. We can definitely make this happen.
Oh, there's been so many dope, so many complicated moments. It's been like just a whirlwind from off rip. But I feel like a funny moment would be our first night in the house. Um, the fire alarms just kept going off, and then we're just like, what the fuck? And realized that you couldn't just take the battery out because they were like hardwired, and we're just like, wow, like white people really give a shit about fire alarms. We've never experienced anything like this ever in our lives. And it's like 3 a.m. and we're like, the neighbors are gonna call the cops. Like, we're just like shitting a whole brick, and then we're just like, all you gotta do is unplug the thing, and then our problems are gone. And we're like, wait, there's nobody that's gonna yell at us and be like, you unplugged the fire alarms. I don't know how legal that is, but we could do it because it was our place, and it was just this like moment of just like pure like, wow, we could put a hole in the wall and don't have to be accountable for anyone other than ourselves. And it was just that relief of just being like, wow, this ain't shit. Being woken up at 3 a.m. to some alarms is crap. But like, if I had to do it any way, like, I'm glad that this is the way to experience that.
A really hard moment was when we had decided to put an offer on the house we're living in now. There was a second house. I don't know how much people know in depth, but we had put in an offer on our first house that didn't go through because that guy was a jerk. And we were like, so, really in love with the house. It was great, but it didn't work out. And we were like, yeah, not worth it, not worth the time and the energy. And then we found this other house that was like the dream of what I could think of living somewhere, a huge yard, all of these great things that we had been looking for. We put an offer and we didn't get accepted. And then we came across this place. And it was definitely missing things. In the sense that like we really hope to have a third bedroom because Stick and I live in separate rooms, and have had talks about what it looked like in our friendship to like raise kids together, and we were hoping to be able to have that as an option. And so there were definitely things about this place that like fell short in that aspect, and we kind of had to like walk ourselves to the finish line to put in an offer on this place, which I don't regret now. But literally the day we go to put in the offer, the second house we looked at that we had put in an offer for reached back out that the person no longer wanted the house and had pulled out. And so I just remember like sitting in my car sobbing with Susie and Sue on the phone, like, I don't know what to do. Because I love both of these houses and they both offer different things and I know. And everybody I just remember like Sue and Susie just like, I'm gonna take a breath. Let's just talk this out. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, and then I just remember we literally ended the conversation being like, we're just gonna put in both offers and we're just gonna pray that the right house is the house that you get. And the next day we got the call that this house picked the owner picked our offer, and the other house didn't. And it was just such a moment of like, maybe this is just what it's supposed to be. After that, I ended up leaving a really toxic job. And because we ended up in this smaller house, I'm actually able to do that, take some time to get my mental health and stuff into a better place to think about getting back into another job. So it really ended up working out beautifully. But that was such an emotional, like, raw moment for me in the campaign. Like, I never really knew how difficult it would be to pick a place to live, because we're just so used to accepting what we can that, like, accepting the little things we do get to then actually have this power of making that decision was really huge. Um, and my favorite moment out of the whole campaign was the first time I went to go look at a house. There was two realtors, there were two white girls, and we were walking through the house. We purposely, like, didn't go dressed up, like, we didn't change who we were as people, so we went in like sweats and t-shirts and checking out this big ass house. And, like, the whole time they both had ignored us. We walked through the whole house, we did this whole thing, and neither one of them spoke to us. So then we're in the kitchen eating the snacks, and the lady comes over to start talking to us, and she said something like, "Oh, do you know how much you're getting in a loan?" Like, she wanted to know, like, what our money looked like before she would continue a conversation with us. And then I just looked her in the face, and I'm like, "Oh no, we're paying cash." And her face dropped, like, she didn't expect these two black folks to come in and be like, "Oh no, we have cash
money."
And then she kind of was like, "Oh, cash. Cash is good. Cash is good." I was like, "Yeah, I got that." And it was just like such a moment. Like, I was like, I can't imagine, like, luckily we were able to do this where we didn't have a mortgage. But I'm like, damn, like, you didn't talk to us the whole time we was here, but you talked to, like, the 30 other white folks that don't walk through this house and didn't have anything. We're convincing them to buy the house. We're putting in all this labor to get these folks to purchase, and, like, did not once pay us any mind. Then when I said cash, the whole lady done, like, let me switch up. And at that point, we didn't want the house. Like, and so that moment for me was like, I was like, I probably could never say that again, but that was great.
What else do you want people to know about reparations?
That it's an emotional journey as much as it is a tangible physical journey. Just like, I remember having a conversation with a friend. We're like, we're being given this opportunity and this, that, and the other thing, and she had to, like, stop me in my tracks and be like, no, this is reparations. Like, this is different. Like, this isn't you receiving charity. This isn't you, like, this is, like, you've already done the work for this and beyond. And just remembering that, like, I get to assert myself. I get to be in the position of power here. And I feel like that isn't something that, as a black, femme-bodied, non-conforming, fat, poor individual, that I seldom feel. And just, like, remembering to be like, no, I get to call Kelly or Sue or Misha at 11:30 at night because I'm freaking out about something. Like, that it's not just like, I don't have to walk on eggshells. I don't have to tiptoe around. I don't have to feel like I, like, deserve this, so to speak. Like, of course I do. Like, and that was a piece that I'm still learning, and I'm still trying to, like, wrap my mind around that in a world where a lot of the people I know and a lot of the people that I love and a lot of the activists and organizers across the country, like, don't ever get to experience in a real way. And I think that it's that point that, like, fuels me to keep going and to keep, like, hanging in there and seeing where and what my relationship to and with SURJ could look like in the future for other black folks.
Yeah, I think like this was life changing, right? Like, being able to purchase a home. Um, but I think also, like, I would hate for people to get caught up in these huge ideals. Like, $1,000 would have changed things in my life. Would it have been like a permanent change? Like, no. But I think people sometimes see like, oh, it's this huge thing, like we're never going to get to that place. And it's just like it's taking it a step at a time. Like paying somebody's rent for a month is a huge deal. You know, do we deserve more? Hell fucking yeah. Like I'm not saying reach for the little shit. I'm just saying that sometimes it's the both and like the grand things like this, like raising all this money to purchase a house, and also it's helping somebody with groceries. It's you know creating a fund where folks can get access to money and not gatekeeping it. I think also a lot of people are caught up in who is deserving of this money. Like I shouldn't need to have been an organizer and all of these things to be worthy of a house. You know what I'm saying? And I don't feel like that is what we as a collective thought. But that's not to say like the messaging wasn't centered in us being organizers, that those weren't key components to the campaign, and those weren't key reasons also certain people gave. Like certain people gave because we were organizers. So certain people invested because we were people who cared about our community. But also like the single mom like deserves housing. Like Black trans women deserve housing. Like
sex workers and addicts
deserve housing. Like people just getting out of jail deserve housing. Like it's and so to not so much. I think a lot of the time, even in organizing, we talk about like even when something bad happens, and we're like, this person was a good person. Like a person doesn't need to be a good person to be deserving of resources and to be deserving of basic human decency. And so like when I think about reparations, it's that is the key thing for me, is that every person, like every Black and brown person, is deserving of reparations of some kind. Like every Black and brown person deserves housing. Like those are things that are not debatable. So if you're going into reparations, it's about investing like that, like rediverting your resources. And it's not about who gets them at the end of the day. Like obviously it should always be centered in the most marginalized. But my point is just that I think people get caught up in the who I'm helping, like who I'm helping save these people. But it's like, nah, like it has to come from I have like systematically have this privilege. I systematically have this power. I systematically have these resources. The resources I have stem from harm against Black and brown bodies, stem from rape, murder, genocide, like, and that's the reason you give money, not because you visualize this picture perfect idea of who the perfect Black person is for you.
Yeah, you said that so perfectly. So I'll just add another component, which is that reparations also means being accountable for the harm we're doing in terms of policing and our military and our jails and prisons, and that reparations can also look like defunding and abolishing those things and using those resources to invest in Black communities through bigger housing and housing programs and education and healthcare and reproductive justice and mental health care, and decriminalizing sex work. And those things, we all have such a high stake in those things in terms of mutual interest. And yes, so we can be doing reparations on this individual level in our communities because that is owed to Black people and Indigenous people, and be doing the organizing for the bigger work and the bigger collective.
I mean, I wish I had spoken first because I feel like I want to end on those notes, but I think, there probably, hopefully, will be like white people listening to this or watching this that are thinking about and noticing things coming up for them, around money. And I think I want to really reiterate what everyone else said, that like reparations is repayment for harm done. And just also add that that there's all kinds of ways to be a part of the process of paying reparations, that we can't get stuck in one model. Like it can only be institutional, or it can only be governmental, or it can only be personal, right? And that there are all kinds of places, like if you have a savings account, if you have investments, like if you are in a house that you own, regardless of whether you have a mortgage, like you have something that you can give. And that it's about creating a practice around that starts to shift culture. And I think that's something that, you know, takes like time and like personal investment. You know, me saying this is not going to change anybody's mind, but the more that we like say these things out loud and make space to talk about it in like our various communities, the more that shift is going to happen.
Like this shit was so incredibly linked to our survival. Like I don't know where we would be in the next few years if we didn't find a way to get into stable housing. And that is just the truth, and I know that that's the truth for a lot of different people. And so for me, it's just like, it doesn't end here. It doesn't end with just our happy story. You know, and there are other people in worse predicaments than we are. There are other people who need more than we do. And it's great that we got to this place. But like, it's our responsibility as also the people who were on the receiving end of this to also challenge folks. Like, other people need to be on the receiving end. More people need to be on the receiving end of reparations. Like, it wouldn't have been a good project if we were not centered in every organizing decision. And so for me, that's the key. Like, follow Black and brown leadership, put your money where your mouth is. Like, invest in these communities, invest in people. Because a lot of us are going through it. It is a blessing to have housing right now. It is a blessing to not be in a rental situation. It was a blessing to be able to leave a really toxic job because now I have stable housing. So that's it for me. Like, just continue to do the work, because the work never ends.
All right, thank you. That's a great note to end on. All right, thank you everyone for your time.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, so hi everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I am Kelly, and I am one of the core organizers with the Western Mass chapter of Showing Up for Racial Justice. And I'm so excited to be here in conversation with some other core members, Sophie, Jess, Avi, and Larkin. And we're excited to see a former core member who moved away, sadly, Grover. It's great to have you here. So we're just going to jump right in. And actually, Grover, can we start with you to just talk about like why this reparations campaign and specifically this house buying project feels so important?
Sure. So when I proposed, because we had a campaign proposal meeting, the reparations campaign, Western MassSURJ was in the process of picking a campaign. And one of the things as an organization, there was a couple of things that were, how do I say, challenging as an organization in terms of doing the work of organizing white people for racial justice and against white supremacy. And one of them was that we needed a campaign, and the other is that to unify around something specific. And the other was that working primarily out of Northampton, Massachusetts, there's very profound racial segregation geographically, in that it's a half an hour or an hour from places that are primarily Black and POC communities, and also that there's really, for me as a person raised working class and who had been poor much of my adult life, just really profound wealth and class privilege in Northampton itself. And as an organization, we were trying to address that, but also it seemed like it was it was shaping all the perspectives in the work. And so in proposing a reparations campaign, it was in part to address this profound difference between what Black and POC organizations and leaders were dealing with as organizers in communities, and like not having gas money to come to meetings even, whereas lots of folks in our organization had a deep bench of wealth or resources. And so to really look head on and start to address that deep economic inequality that is also racial.
I also think that, you know, that we had the opportunity to do a lot of really amazing education around, you know, educating other white folks about the, you know, the history of our country and the racial wealth gap in a way that provided some really good context, but also was able to move money and do something concretely useful. So it wasn't just that we're kind of sitting in a circle, you know, educating each other endlessly, that it was also, you know, provided something concrete. And I also think that when we decided on the campaign, it was, I think there's been a lot of work done for, you know, generations around the idea of reparations, but I think it's much more, the word itself is much more in the mainstream now than it was a few years back when we picked it. And so I think getting some comfort in the white community just with tolerating that word, I think was also a reason that we picked the campaign.
This like campaign just offers like so many important opportunities for like uncomfortable, challenging conversations and like personal commitments and like personal, I don't know, like personal growth that has been really important to me and other folks. And I don't know, that this house is such a like secure and stable thing is, I don't know, really exciting.
If you could speak to like, what were your thoughts about this early on, and like how confident were you in the feasibility of the project and why?
When we first started talking about reparations, it was like just as I'd kind of gotten involved in the work and in like Western Mass SURJ specifically. And I honestly like wasn't quite sure, like, okay, I want to do racial justice work. Like, what does that look like? And so when we started talking about specific campaigns and in particular reparations, it just like made me really excited to understand like really specific ways that we could be like moving money and supporting Black people and people of color in our area specifically. So that was like generally originally just like very exciting to me and interesting. I would say reparations like wasn't a thing that I knew a lot about. I knew that I like believed it to be important, but I personally was excited because it felt like something that wasn't talked about a lot in my communities. And so could really like some difference could really come about even just in the conversations that people are having around the words and terms and that kind of thing.
Thanks. Yeah, Grover, you were there, you know, in the beginning and really involved, and then had this cross-country move. Like, do you remember what it was like back then?
Yeah, I do. This is reminding me that when we initially started talking about it and talking about reparations in general as a campaign focus, we explored or planned out the possibility for many different avenues, including political education around a state bill for reparations and then the national bill for reparations. And it's reminding me that even in those initial conversations, even in the room with the 20 or 30 of us, there was consistently this snag about like, well, but who would pay, and but should I have to pay, which I think white people often get snagged on about reparations, is that even though we maybe could politically and should politically get to like, we need mass reparations to happen, get snagged in the like scarcity of it. And it quickly became clear to me, I think other people, that we really had to practice, and that in order to talk to other people outside our circle, right, in order to door knock our neighborhood and say, we want to talk to you about reparations, the first thing people say is, well, what are you doing? What are you willing to give up, right? And what we learn through practicing something is profoundly different than what we learned from reading something in a book or an article, right? Or even talking about it with each other. And so as we moved forward in conversations at first with Springfield No One Leaves and Stickii and ShaeShae, it was about how do we practice this thing and in relationship, and not just theoretically talk about reparations.
I'm thinking a lot about that relational piece all along, but especially this summer. So I think a lot of people are going to wonder, like, how did we actually raise all this money? In the end, it was $140,000. And yeah, Sophie, maybe could you share a little bit about everything that happened along the way?
Yeah, I think one thing that got people excited about paying reparations is when we specifically had this house where we, while the amount kind of changed a little bit as we went on, but we were looking to make sure that we had in reparations payments at least $100,000 so that this house could be purchased. I think having that goal of being able to provide housing as reparations really helped build momentum. We had people paying through PayPal monthly reparations, which we really encouraged. And I think for me too, has been really powerful to kind of begin this practice of reparations are a part of my monthly life. And every single month I'll be making payments of reparations. And I think many other people got signed up to do that as well. And then I also think we had a number of events and that really helped get the word out about this house buying project in the name of reparations. And at these events, where sometimes they would be just something light like a house concert or a birthday party, and other events that thematically focused on something like gentrification in our area, we would encourage people to make reparations payments at these events or be signed up to become monthly donors. And I think those are ways that we built pretty largely the pool of people who were paying reparations and encouraging everyone to push themselves to be paying more as part of reparations.
Yeah, I would probably just add to that, like, that we've continued to have, general meetings that are open to the public, and that the reparations campaign is always discussed at those meetings. There have been some dialogue circles that were focused on reparations, but a really, really big piece of it was the relationship that we have with Resource Generation, which is an organization for young people ages 18 to 35 who have access to generational wealth. And they ended up giving a lot of money. I actually don't have the number on the top of my head, but many thousands of dollars towards this campaign, and really mobilizing their people as well in support of it. And that was exciting because it was more money for our campaign, but also because getting that money really generated a lot of excitement and made other people start to pay attention in the community, and then make the commitment to making monthly payments. Let's talk a little bit about how this process impacted perspectives and feelings about reparations and money.
Coming into this campaign, I really didn't have language to talk about money. Coming from owning class privilege, I had a lot of shame and wasn't talking to other folks about money. And this space really pushed me to be giving boldly, and to also be starting conversations with family and friends about reparations, and using words and conversations around racialized capitalism in my life. And yeah, I really appreciate the space that this campaign has created to talk about reparations.
Yeah, so this campaign has actually had a pretty profound impact on my relationship with money. I feel like it was a kick in the butt to get my money shit in order. The invitation to really kind of do an inventory and take stock of
what I've had unearned access to, and to also ask the question of what is enough, I think was a really, very useful exercise for me. We brought in some of the wisdom of Hadassah Damien for our sliding scale. I think you posted something about her at one point, Grover, and I then ended up doing some coursework with her and like really getting my budget shit in order so that I could like know how much I had. And it's like embarrassing how kind of much I had to grow in that way. But I did. And now it's like, I feel like I have my shit in order, and I now know like how much I can, well, now it's a little bit different because of the pandemic and whatever, but in general, I have a sense of what my goal is to be paying towards reparations every month. And that feels profound in my life. I know not necessarily the point of the campaign, but for me was pretty profound.
Avi, you mentioned class really specifically, and Western Mass SURJ has a practice of centering class. Well, SURJ National has a commitment to centering class, and Western Mass SURJ has really tried to tend to that. And, I know some things came up around class in this process, certainly for all of us who were doing this work, but also like in the way that we communicated with our community. And so, yeah, I just want to open up some conversation about that. And Grover, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about this sort of question of like institutional versus personal reparations and how that impacted the beginning of the campaign.
Most organizations and people who advocate for reparations advocate for it as an institutional requirement from the United States government, from banks and corporations, and from state governments, from city governments, right? And when we started this campaign, there was a little bit of that, and we've seen that enacted in some city legislation in the years since. And so I think that in my mind, that is ultimately where these practices are hopefully leading, but we have to build political will and education in order to make it happen under the current conditions that we live in the United States. And also there are people who advocate for actually white people have all of this stuff and land and wealth and education and access that we hoard, and actually letting go of that is a way of making repair, right? And investing into reparations which we have, and making reparations interpersonally is a way in which we can start putting into practice what we hope to happen politically at a wide scale.
We got a lot of questions though about that, right? Like that was a hard idea for people, the idea of paying personal reparations and also like paying it to specific people. And Larkin, I'm wondering if you might talk about some of that, like why Stickii and ShaeShae, and like this idea of like who deserves reparations.
I would say that the most basic answer is like Black people deserve reparations, and we as Western Mass SURJ do not have the money for everyone at the moment. So we chose two people that we were in relationship with to be paying towards, who we believed, or we knew they would need that money, but we would have paid it to anyone else. It wasn't a specific, like, we didn't have any criteria or boxes we needed to check to find out what they were doing with it. I think going in more in depth, also housing is just like something that generationally builds so much wealth and has been a big problem throughout history as a way to for white people to hoard wealth. And so particularly paying money for housing is a specific way that we can work against that.
I had a number of conversations with people over this especially like in the last few months about since we bought the house, and we're also supporting Stickii and ShaeShae and in getting items for their house, of people really reacting to like why they like get these nice things. And I've been grappling with how to respond to that, because it gets into this idea of like deserving, which I think is really like dangerous, and also just sort of perpetuating these ideas that we have about who gets what, you know, this meritocracy in the United States. And, you know, I think I really believe in a world where like everybody's needs are met, and that includes, and most, you know, I think first and foremost, this, you know, stable housing and housing at all. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything about that.
I just want to say that white supremacy is heinous and disgusting, and there is no criteria for us to hoard and access that, right? So anyway, I'm having some big feelings, but it's just like, why not Stickii and ShaeShae? Who gives a shit what they do at that house? It's theirs now, right? That's not anyone's business. And they like this idea that people who were paid reparations should also act as if they don't deserve nice things is bullshit. Like, everybody deserves nice things. If you've ever yourself bought or wanted to buy a nice thing, then shut your yap if somebody else wants a nice thing, something that's not used by another human. Or yes, feeling mad about that. They get whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah, for me, it brought up the way that people impose their own values onto other people, and also like that access to, you know, like getting used things, even getting used things is an access to resources that isn't available to everyone. So, well, we are wrapping up. It's too short always, but we have about 2 minutes left. If anyone has any thoughts, or there's anything that you want people to know about this experience.
What I think is in kind of the conversation about what it means to pay reparations, that and how that's different than like donating to a nonprofit, which is maybe an experience that more like middle or upper class white people have, is this kind of, you give up control of what happens with that money after you pay it as reparations. And I think that's an experience that can be moving, like for me to work through, and for other people who have perhaps participated in this project, is that when you think about reparations, which is paying something that's owed, you don't get to, you know, be like, well, I only want to pay it if it goes toward this kind of exact purpose that fits with what I would do with it if I had that money. And I think that's, yeah, something that's came up in this project and we've like worked through and had conversations about. One other thing that felt really important in this process is, while we were kind of beginning this campaign, we spent a lot of time at our SURJ meetings where we would do class caucusing, where you would go and meet with other people who shared a similar class background experience from you, and you could talk about what those experiences were, and also use that space to think about how much you were going to be able to pay in reparations and why reparations were meaningful to you. And to me, that was really a powerful experience of having to confront what my class background was in a really tangible way, and being able to find support in other people who were like raised with similar class values and were reckoning with them in this time.
Thanks, Sophie. Does anyone else want to add anything? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of my best pieces of advice is that if you are watching this and you are not with some kind of collective group of people, that to find a political home so that you can build power and move money in ways bigger than just yourself.
Oh yeah, and it's, for me, I guess, as monumentous and as huge as this is in my personal life, like, it doesn't and end here. And this isn't the end all be all. Like that, there's still so much more that I, as an organizer, can do to and with my community, and there's so much more that white folks and folks like the folks in SURJ can do. Like that, it doesn't have to be like, like it might not be sustainable for this particular organization to buy 10 houses in the next 10 years. Like that might not be it, and that's okay. But to just use this as a learning tool and a stepping stone so that we can figure out collectively what steps forward look like, and where reparations and what reparations could look like globally.
Mm-hmm.
Western Mass SURJ is continuing to pay reparations to local Black and Indigenous groups. Please visit WMSURJ.com to make a one-time or recurring reparations payment. Or look for ways in your local community to engage in a practice of reparations. Thank you.